The blood-red sun dipped below the craggy horizon as Olivia Anderson clutched her 5-year-old daughter Emma's hand, her breath coming in desperate gasps as they plunged deeper into the dense forest that bordered Sierra Vista, Arizona territory. Behind them, the distant shouts of her husband Thomas echoed through the gathering dusk, his drunken rage carrying on the evening breeze. It was May of 1878, and Olivia had finally done what she'd been contemplating for months. She had run. The purpling bruise around her eye throbbed with each heartbeat, a reminder of what awaited if Thomas caught them. Her cotton dress, once a cheerful blue, was torn at the shoulder and stained with her own blood from where he'd thrown her against the kitchen table just hours before. "Mama, I'm scared," Emma whispered, her small legs struggling to keep pace as they navigated through underbrush and around towering pines. "I know, sweetheart," Olivia replied, forcing steadiness into her voice despite the terror clawing at her throat. "But we need to keep moving. Remember what I told you. We're going on an adventure." The adventure had begun 3 years ago when Thomas Anderson returned from a cattle drive a changed man. The kind, loving husband who had courted her with wildflowers and sweet words had disappeared, replaced by a stranger whose temper flared at the slightest provocation. The whiskey he consumed nightly only worsened his moods, and Olivia had learned to anticipate the signs of impending violence: the tightening of his jaw, the flexing of his fists, the cold stillness in his eyes just before the storm broke. For years, she'd endured. For Emma's sake. For the sake of appearances in their small community where a woman alone had few prospects. For the naive hope that the man she'd married might somehow return. But tonight, when Thomas had turned his attention to Emma for spilling milk at supper, something in Olivia had snapped. She had thrust herself between them, taking the blow meant for her daughter, and in that moment, she knew they would leave or die trying. The forest grew denser as they moved away from town, the fading light making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Olivia had no clear destination in mind, only away. Away from the fists and the fear, away from the shame and the suffering that had become their daily existence. "Listen to me, Emma," Olivia whispered, kneeling down to look her daughter in the eyes. "We're going to find a place to rest for the night, but you must stay very quiet like we're playing that hiding game. Can you do that for Mama?" Emma nodded solemnly, her small face serious beyond her years. Children shouldn't understand fear this intimately, Olivia thought bitterly. They shouldn't recognize the sound of a belt being removed or flinch at her raised voice. They shouldn't have to flee their homes in the dead of night. They found a small hollow beneath a fallen pine, its massive trunk creating a natural shelter. Olivia arranged the few belongings she'd managed to grab: a worn blanket, a small loaf of bread, a canteen of water, and the tiny wooden horse her father had carved for Emma before consumption took him to an early grave. It wasn't much to start a new life, but it was all they had. As Emma drifted into an exhausted sleep, Olivia remained vigilant, her body tense with every snapping twig or rustling leaf. The night air grew cold, seeping through her thin dress and into her bones. Fear and uncertainty gnawed at her. Where would they go? How would they survive? Sierra Vista was the only home she'd known since marrying Thomas, and she had no family left to turn to. Morning came with a pale, watery light filtering through the trees. Olivia had dozed fitfully, startling awake at the slightest sound. Her body ached from the hard ground and from yesterday's violence, but there was no time to dwell on discomfort. They needed to keep moving, to put as much distance as possible between themselves and Thomas. "Emma, sweetheart, it's time to wake up," Olivia whispered, gently stroking her daughter's tangled blonde curls. Emma stirred, blinking up at her mother with confusion before memory returned, her small face crumpling. "Is Papa coming to find us?" "We're not going to worry about that right now," Olivia answered, avoiding a direct lie. "First, we're going to have some breakfast and then we'll continue our adventure." They shared the bread and water, rationing carefully. Olivia had no hunting skills, no knowledge of which wild plants might be safe to eat. They would need to find help soon or risk starvation. As they prepared to leave their makeshift shelter, a sound froze Olivia in place. Hoofbeats, approaching slowly but steadily. Panic surged through her veins. Had Thomas enlisted help to track them? Were they already found? Hide, Emma. Quickly, she hissed, pushing her daughter deeper into the hollow and covering her with the blanket. Don't make a sound, no matter what happens. Olivia positioned herself in front of the hiding place, scanning desperately for a weapon. She found a heavy branch and gripped it with white knuckles, her heart hammering against her ribs as the hoofbeats drew nearer. The rider emerged from between the trees, tall and broad-shouldered atop a chestnut gelding. Relief flooded through Olivia when she realized it wasn't Thomas. This man was a stranger, his face partially obscured by the brim of a dusty Stetson. He wore simple clothes, trail-worn but clean, a faded blue shirt, denim trousers, and a leather vest. A gun belt hung low on his hips, but he made no move toward the weapon. He reined his horse to a stop several yards away, studying her with careful eyes the color of storm clouds. Something in his gaze, caution mingled with concern rather than threat, made Olivia lower her makeshift weapon slightly, though she remained tense and ready. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and quiet, "you look like you might be in some trouble." Olivia swallowed hard, uncertain whether to trust this stranger or flee deeper into the wilderness. "I'm fine, sir, just camping." The man's eyes took in her bruised face, torn dress, and the defensive stance. His expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something hard passing through his eyes before being carefully masked. "Name's Daniel Quinn," he offered, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with sun-bleached strands. "Most folks call me Danny. I've got a small ranch about 5 miles north of here." "We don't need help," Olivia insisted, even as her empty stomach clenched and her arms trembled from exhaustion. Daniel Quinn nodded slowly, respecting the distance she maintained. "Wouldn't presume to say what you need, madam. But I've got coffee brewing back at my place, and my housekeeper, Mrs. Fay, makes biscuits that might convince even the most stubborn soul to reconsider their position on accepting hospitality." As if on cue, a small sneeze came from beneath the blanket. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly, but he made no comment about the sound. "Seems like your camping partner might be getting a bit of the morning chill," he said mildly. "Offer stands for both of you. No questions asked that you don't want to answer." Olivia hesitated, torn between desperate need and ingrained caution. This man could be another threat or their salvation. How could she know? Thomas had seemed kind once too. Daniel seemed to read her thoughts. He slowly dismounted, movements deliberate and non-threatening, and took several steps back from his horse. "I understand being careful around strangers, especially." He paused, eyes flickering once more to her bruises. "Especially when you've had reason to lose trust. I'll make you a deal. You keep that stick. I'll stay right where I am, and you decide whether you and your little one want a hot meal or prefer I ride on and forget I saw you." The sincerity in his voice, the careful distance he maintained, and the gnawing hunger in her belly finally tipped the scales of Olivia's decision. "Emma," she called softly, "you can come out now." The little girl emerged cautiously, clutching the wooden horse to her chest, eyes wide with fear and curiosity as she regarded the tall stranger. Daniel crouched down to Emma's eye level, keeping a respectful distance. "Well, hello there, Miss Emma. That's quite a fine horse you've got." Emma looked to her mother for permission before responding. "His name is Thunder," she said shyly. "Grandpa made him." "He did excellent work," Daniel replied seriously. "I've got some real horses back at my place. Not as portable as yours, but they do give rides sometimes to young ladies who ask politely." A tiny smile tugged at Emma's lips, the first Olivia had seen in weeks. That small expression of joy, more than anything else, solidified her decision. "We'll accept your offer of breakfast, Mr. Quinn," Olivia said, straightening her shoulders despite her fear. "But I want to be clear we won't be staying. We're just passing through." Daniel nodded, returning his hat to his head. Fair enough. I can give you a lift on Rusty here, or we can walk if you'd prefer to keep your feet on the ground. The thought of walking another 5 miles made Olivia's legs ache, but the idea of being so close to this stranger unsettled her equally. We'll walk alongside, she decided. As you wish, Daniel agreed easily. He gathered Rusty's reins and began leading the horse, maintaining a careful distance from Olivia and Emma as they started the journey toward his ranch. The morning sun climbed higher as they walked, burning away the lingering mist among the trees. Daniel kept a slow pace, mindful of Emma's short legs, and filled the silence with casual observations about the land and wildlife rather than pressing for information. Olivia wasn't ready to give. There's a family of deer that likes to graze in that meadow yonder, he commented, pointing to a sunlit clearing ahead. Sometimes in the early morning you can spot the fawns playing while their mothers watch. Emma's interest visibly piqued. Real deer, like in my picture book. Just like that, Daniel confirmed with a gentle smile. Maybe tomorrow morning we could come watch them if you'd like. Olivia tensed at the implication they might still be here tomorrow, but said nothing. One step at a time, she reminded herself. Breakfast first, then decisions. As they walked, Daniel occasionally pointed out other landmarks. A hawk's nest high in a pine tree, wild blackberry bushes that would bear fruit later in the summer, the distant peaks of mountains that marked the territory boundary. His knowledge of the land spoke of years spent observing and living in harmony with it, so different from Thomas, who saw the land only as something to be conquered and bent to his will. After nearly 2 hours of walking, the trees began to thin, giving way to a well-maintained dirt road that wound through gently rolling hills. Ahead, a modest ranch spread across a valley. A sturdy 2-story house built of logs and stone, a large barn, several corrals, and outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the distant sound of chickens clucking carried on the breeze. It's not much, Daniel said, misreading Olivia's expression of surprise, but it's peaceful. Been working this land for 8 years now, started with nothing but Rusty and a dream. It's lovely, Olivia murmured honestly, struck by the evident care that had gone into creating this home. No empty whiskey bottles littered the yard, no broken fence posts spoke of neglect. Everything appeared well tended, from the neat vegetable garden beside the house to the freshly painted window frames. As they approached, a plump woman in her 60s emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. Her gray hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and deep laugh lines framed her eyes. Daniel Quinn, I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost on your morning ride, she called, her voice warm with affection rather than reproach. Her expression shifted to surprised concern when she spotted Olivia and Emma. Oh my, you've brought company, Mrs. Fay this is. Daniel paused, realizing he'd never asked for Olivia's name. Olivia, she supplied cautiously, and my daughter Emma. They'll be joining us for breakfast, Daniel explained. I found them, camping in the eastern woods. The significant look that passed between Daniel and Mrs. Fay told Olivia that the housekeeper understood far more than was being said aloud. The older woman's eyes took in Olivia's condition with a quick, assessing glance that missed nothing but communicated only compassion. Well then, you're just in time. I've made enough to feed an army as usual, Mrs. Fay said briskly. Come inside, child. Let's get you and your little one cleaned up before the food gets cold. The interior of the house was as well kept as its exterior, simple but comfortable furnishings. Polished wooden floors covered with hand-woven rugs, and windows that let in abundant natural light. No empty bottles, no broken furniture, no lingering smell of stale whiskey. The normalcy of it all made Olivia's throat tight with emotion. Mrs. Fay led them to a small washroom off the kitchen, providing clean towels and a basin of warm water. Take your time, dear. I'll have breakfast on the table when you're ready. There's a clean dress in that chest that might fit you belonged to my niece who visited last summer. Left alone with Emma, Olivia carefully washed her daughter's face and hands, then her own, wincing as the cloth touched her bruises. The dress Mrs. Fay mentioned was a simple calico in a soft green pattern, modest and practical. It fit well enough, though it hung a bit loose around Olivia's too thin frame. When they emerged, the kitchen table was laden with food: fluffy biscuits, scrambled eggs, thick slices of ham, fried potatoes, and a pot of strong coffee. The sight and smell nearly brought Olivia to tears after so many months of meager meals eaten in tense silence. Daniel stood as they entered, pulling out chairs for them with a quiet courtesy that seemed innate rather than performative. "Please, help yourselves." Emma's eyes widened at the spread, looking to her mother for permission before reaching hesitantly for a biscuit. "Go ahead, sweetheart," Olivia encouraged, her own stomach growling audibly. They ate in relative silence at first, the food too welcome to interrupt with conversation. Mrs. Fay bustled about, refilling coffee cups and encouraging second helpings with grandmotherly insistence. Only when Emma had consumed 3 biscuits with jam and was contentedly nibbling on a 4th did Daniel speak. "Mrs. Fay, would you mind showing Emma the new kittens in the barn while I discuss some business with her mother?" The older woman nodded understandingly. "Would you like to see the kittens, Emma? There are 7 of them just born last week, all different colors." Emma looked to Olivia, who nodded permission after a moment's hesitation. "You can go with Mrs. Fay, I'll be right here." Once they were alone, Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression serious but kind. "I don't mean to pry into your business, Mrs. Anderson," Olivia supplied, then immediately regretted giving her real name, Mrs. Anderson. "As I said earlier, you don't owe me any explanations. But I'd like to help if I can." Olivia stared down at her empty plate, fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "Why would you help strangers?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "My mother died when I was 9, he finally said. "My father. He wasn't a kind man, especially when he drank. My sister Ellie was 2 years younger than me. I couldn't protect her, not always." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. "What happened to her?" Olivia asked softly. "She died of fever when she was 15, but the years before that." He shook his head. "No child should live in fear, no woman either." Olivia felt tears burning behind her eyes. "My husband," she admitted, the words barely audible. "He wasn't always. But now, last night he almost hurt Emma. I couldn't let that happen." Daniel nodded, no judgment or pity in his expression, just quiet acceptance of her truth. "Sierra Vista. Yes, he'll be looking for us." "Does he have friends in the sheriff's office?" Olivia nodded miserably. "Sheriff Williams and Thomas go hunting together. He won't help us." Daniel considered this information carefully. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. The ranch is remote enough that few visitors come this way. Mrs. Fay has been with me for years. She's trustworthy and discreet." "I can't accept charity," Olivia protested weakly, even as relief flooded through her at the offer of sanctuary. "It wouldn't be charity. Mrs. Fay isn't getting any younger and she could use help with the household. You'd earn your keep." He paused. "And when you're ready to move on, I'll help you get wherever you want to go." The generosity of the offer overwhelmed her. "Why would you do this for someone you don't even know?" Daniel's eyes held her steadily. "Because someone should have done it for my sister." In that moment, looking into his storm-gray eyes, Olivia made a decision that would change the course of her life and Emma's. She would accept his help not forever, just until she could formulate a plan, save some money, create a future for herself and her daughter. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll stay for a little while." The little while stretched into weeks as May gave way to June, and the Arizona summer settled over the land with its dry, intense heat. Olivia and Emma fell into the rhythm of ranch life, finding comfort in its predictable patterns after years of walking on eggshells. Mrs. Fay proved to be a godsend, teaching Olivia to bake bread and preserve vegetables from the garden, showing Emma how to collect eggs without frightening the hens, sharing stories from her own long life that often contained subtle wisdom about resilience and survival. The older woman never pressed for details about their past, but offered quiet support in countless small ways, a comforting pat on the shoulder when Olivia startled at sudden noises, extra patience when Emma had nightmares. Daniel maintained a respectful distance, never entering their room without knocking, always announcing his presence before entering a space where Olivia might be working alone. His kindness was consistent but unobtrusive. He taught Emma to ride a gentle mare named Daisy, built her a swing from a spare piece of rope and wood, and brought home books from his infrequent trips to town. For Olivia, he provided something equally valuable: space to heal and rediscover herself. The woman who had been beaten down over years was gradually re-emerging, straightening her spine, finding her voice, remembering how to laugh. The bruises faded from her skin, though the memories remained, surfacing sometimes in dreams that left her gasping and disoriented in the darkness. On one such night in early July, Olivia woke from a nightmare, Thomas's rage-distorted face still vivid in her mind. Unable to return to sleep, she slipped from the bed she shared with Emma and made her way downstairs, thinking a cup of tea might settle her nerves. She found Daniel at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low as he reviewed ledgers and paperwork. He looked up at her entrance, concern immediately replacing concentration. "Bad dream?" he asked quietly. Olivia nodded, self-consciously tugging her borrowed dressing gown closer around her nightdress. "I didn't expect anyone to be awake. End-of-the-month accounts," he explained, gesturing to the papers before him. "Never was much good with numbers, but the cattle don't feed themselves." He stood, moving to the stove. "I was about to make coffee. Would you prefer tea?" "Tea would be nice, thank you." They worked in companionable silence, Daniel heating water while Olivia found cups and the tin of tea leaves Mrs. Fay kept for special occasions. "You want to talk about it?" Daniel asked as they settled at the table, steam rising from their cups. "The dream." Olivia cradled the warm cup between her palms, drawing comfort from its heat. "It's always the same, Thomas finding us, taking Emma. Hurting her while I can't move, can't scream, can't stop him." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The fear doesn't go away quickly." "Does it ever go away completely?" He considered the question honestly. "Not completely, but it fades, becomes manageable. How did you?" She began, then hesitated, unsure if the question was too personal. "Get past what my father did," Daniel finished for her. "One day at a time. Building something different from what I knew growing up." He looked around the kitchen, at the home he'd created. "Proving to myself that not all men are like him." Olivia studied him in the lamplight, the strength in his hands that had never been used against her, the eyes that looked at her with respect rather than ownership, the patient way he listened when she spoke. "You've succeeded," she said softly. "You're nothing like him, or Thomas." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a warmth that made Olivia suddenly aware of their solitude, of the intimacy of sharing midnight tea and confidences. "Thank you for saying that," he replied, his voice low. "It means more than you know." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities, before Olivia broke the connection, looking down at her tea. "I should try to get some sleep," she said, rising from the table. "Emma wakes with the birds these days." Daniel stood as well, maintaining the respectful distance he always kept. "Of course. Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Daniel." As she climbed the stairs back to her room, Olivia acknowledged to herself what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was starting to care for Daniel Quinn in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. July slipped into August, bringing thunderstorms that rolled across the valley with spectacular displays of lightning and briefly relieved the summer heat. The ranch flourished under the combination of rain and sunshine. Vegetables ripened in the garden, calves born in the spring grew sturdy on rich summer grass, and wildflowers painted the nearby meadows in vibrant colors. Emma blossomed as well, shedding the fearful quietness that had marked her early days at the ranch. She followed Mrs. Fay like a shadow, eagerly learning to shell peas and roll dough. She trailed after Daniel whenever he allowed it, peppering him with questions about the cattle and horses, proudly reporting when she spotted the deer family in the meadow. Most nights, she fell asleep within minutes of her head touching the pillow, her dreams apparently free of the terrors that had once plagued her. Olivia found herself smiling more, laughing at Emma's antics, enjoying conversations with Mrs. Fay, and looking forward to the quiet evenings when Daniel would read aloud from one of his books while she mended clothes or worked on a quilt Mrs. Fay had helped her start. But beneath this growing contentment ran an undercurrent of anxiety. Thomas was still out there. He would still be looking for them. And the life they were building at the Quinn Ranch existed in a strange limbo, neither temporary nor permanent, with the future unspoken and uncertain. The uncertainty came to a head on a sweltering afternoon in late August. Daniel had ridden to Sierra Vista for supplies, a monthly trip he made alone, always returning with news for Olivia about the town, but never mentioning whether there was talk of her disappearance. Mrs. Fay was napping, and Emma was playing with the kitten's now rambunctious young cats in the shade of the porch. Olivia was hanging laundry on the line when she heard hoofbeats approaching too soon to be Daniel returning. Her hands froze on the damp sheet she was pinning up, heart suddenly racing. Could it be Thomas? Had he somehow found them? Emma, she called, fighting to keep her voice steady. Come here, please. Her daughter appeared around the corner of the house, a gray kitten cradled in her arms. What is it, Mama? Go inside to Mrs. Fay. Right now. Something in Olivia's tone must have triggered memories of earlier frightened escapes. Emma immediately set down the kitten and ran for the house without argument, a reaction that broke Olivia's heart even as it ensured her daughter's safety. Olivia moved toward the house herself, intent on barricading the door if necessary when the rider came into view. Relief flooded through her. It wasn't Thomas, but a young man she didn't recognize, barely more than a boy, riding a lathered horse that suggested urgency. Madam, he called, reining to a stop. You Mrs. Anderson? Olivia's relief evaporated instantly. Who's asking? Name's Billy, madam. I work at the general store in Sierra Vista. Mr. Quinn asked me to come tell you he's been delayed. Said not to worry, but he won't be back until tomorrow. Delayed, Olivia repeated, anxiety creeping back. Did he say why? Billy shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Well, madam, there was some trouble in town. That is, a man named Thomas Anderson was making a scene at the saloon, saying his wife and child had been stolen. Mr. Quinn happened to be there picking up some items. There were words exchanged. Olivia's blood ran cold. What kind of words? I didn't hear it all, madam, but Mr. Anderson threw the first punch when Mr. Quinn suggested maybe his wife had good reason to leave. Sheriff Williams broke it up before it got too bad, but he's keeping both men in the jail overnight to cool down. Billy looked apologetic. Mr. Quinn gave me $2 to ride out here and let you know he's fine and will explain everything tomorrow. Olivia's mind raced with implications. Thomas was still actively searching for them. He'd encountered Daniel, the sheriff was involved. Their peaceful sanctuary suddenly felt threatened from all sides. Thank you for bringing the message, she managed to say. Would you like some water before you ride back? Billy accepted gratefully, drinking deeply from the dipper at the well before mounting his horse again. Mr. Quinn said to tell you one more thing, madam. He said, tell Olivia not to run. I'll handle this. The simple message, so accurately predicting her instinct to flee at the first sign of danger, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She nodded acknowledgement, watching as Billy rode away, then turned toward the house where Emma waited, undoubtedly frightened by the sudden interruption of their peaceful afternoon. Mrs. Fay was in the kitchen, fully awake now and making tea with Emma helping to arrange cups on the table. Who was that riding in such a hurry? The housekeeper asked, eyeing Olivia's pale face with concern. A messenger from town. Daniel, Mr. Quinn has been delayed. He won't be back until tomorrow. Olivia hesitated, glancing at Emma, There was some trouble. Mrs. Fay understood immediately. "Emma, dear, why don't you go check if those kittens need more milk?" The gray one looked especially hungry earlier. Once Emma had scampered off, Olivia relayed Billy's message in low, urgent tones. Mrs. Fay listened without interruption, her weathered face growing increasingly grim. "So Thomas Anderson knows Daniel by name now," she said when Olivia finished. "That complicates matters. We should leave," Olivia whispered. "I've put Daniel in danger by staying here. Thomas has a terrible temper, he could hurt him or burn the ranch in revenge." Mrs. Fay reached across the table to clasp Olivia's trembling hands. "Listen to me, child. Daniel Quinn is no stranger to handling difficult men. He wouldn't have told you to stay if he didn't have a plan." "But what could his plan possibly be? Thomas won't just give up and go away." "And with the sheriff as his friend." "Sheriff Williams may be friendly with your husband, but he's not a corrupt man," Mrs. Fay said firmly. "He's known Daniel for years and respects him. Let's wait and see what tomorrow brings before making any decisions." Despite Mrs. Fay's reassurance, Olivia barely slept that night, alternating between keeping watch at the window and checking on Emma's peaceful slumber. She tried to imagine what might be happening in Sierra Vista, what Daniel might be saying or doing, whether Thomas was still in a rage or had moved into the cold, calculating anger that had always frightened her more. Morning came with no answers, only the usual chores that needed attending regardless of personal crisis. Olivia went through the motions mechanically, one ear always alert for approaching riders, jumping at small sounds that normally wouldn't register. It was nearly noon when Daniel finally appeared, riding Rusty at an unhurried pace that suggested no immediate danger followed him. Olivia, who had been weeding the garden with increasingly frantic energy, dropped her tools and ran to meet him, heedless of appearances. Daniel dismounted, wincing slightly as his boots hit the ground. Now that he was closer, Olivia could see a dark bruise blooming on his jaw and a cut above his right eyebrow. "You're hurt," she said, reaching toward his face before catching herself and pulling back. "Looks worse than it feels," Daniel assured her, though the tightness around his eyes suggested otherwise. "Where's Emma?" With Mrs. Fay making bread, "Daniel, what happened?" "The boy who came yesterday said Thomas was there, and the sheriff—" "Let's sit down," Daniel suggested, gesturing toward the porch steps. "It's a long story." Once they were seated side by side, Daniel removed his hat, running a hand through hair damp with sweat from the ride. "I was at Miller's General Store when I overheard Thomas Anderson telling anyone who'd listen about his missing wife and child. He was claiming you'd been influenced by immoral elements and stolen away against your will." Olivia made a sound of disbelief and anger, but Daniel continued. "I should have kept my mouth shut and finished my business, but when he started saying you were mentally unfit to make decisions for yourself or Emma." He shook his head. "I suggested maybe there were reasons a woman might leave her husband that had nothing to do with outside influence or mental deficiency." "And he hit you," Olivia guessed, eventually. "First, there was some colorful language questioning my parentage and manhood. Then suggestions about what he'd do to any man found harboring his wife." Daniel's expression hardened. "Then he mentioned what he planned to do to you when he found you. That's when I hit him." "You hit him first?" Olivia asked, surprised. "I did," Daniel admitted without regret. "Sheriff Williams arrived about then, broke it up, and decided we both needed a night in jail to cool our tempers." "Were you in the same cell?" The thought of Daniel locked up with Thomas terrified her. Different cells, but close enough to talk. Daniel turned to face her fully. "Olivia, I need to tell you something important. While we were in that jail, I made your husband an offer." Apprehension crawled up Olivia's spine. "What kind of offer?" "I offered to buy your marriage contract from him." Olivia stared at Daniel in shock. What are you talking about?" "It's an old legal concept, rarely used these days, but still valid in the Arizona territory. If a husband is willing to dissolve a marriage for financial consideration, another man can essentially purchase the marriage contract." Daniel's expression was serious. It would legally free you from Thomas and prevent him from claiming abandonment or adultery against you. You're talking about buying me like property, Olivia said, voice rising with indignation. No, Daniel countered firmly. I'm talking about using an archaic legal system to your advantage. The contract wouldn't transfer to me, it would be dissolved completely. You would be a free woman, legally and financially independent. Olivia's mind struggled to process this information, and Thomas agreed to this. For $500, yes. He was stone-cold sober by morning, and the prospect of immediate cash seemed to appeal to him more than a prolonged search for a wife who clearly doesn't want to be found. Daniel's voice held a note of disgust. Sheriff Williams witnessed the agreement and will file the paperwork. So I'm free, just like that. The concept seemed too simple, too clean after years of complicated suffering. Just like that, Daniel confirmed. Thomas Anderson has relinquished all legal claims to you and Emma. He's agreed to leave Sierra Vista and not return. Last I saw, he was boarding the eastbound stage to Tucson with his pockets considerably heavier. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, a complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering anger that Thomas could so easily sell his rights to his own child. I don't know what to say. Thank you seems inadequate. You don't need to say anything, Daniel replied gently. I didn't do it for thanks. Why did you do it? The question slipped out before Olivia could consider its implications or whether she was ready for the answer. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from Olivia's face to the vast landscape surrounding his ranch. When I built this place, I thought having land and cattle was enough to make a home. It took two people turning up unexpectedly in my woods to show me what was missing. The simple honesty of his words touched something deep in Olivia's heart. And what was that? Life, laughter, purpose beyond just surviving. His eyes returned to hers, earnest and unguarded. I care for you, Olivia, for Emma too. I'm not asking for anything in return for what I did. You're free to stay here as long as you like or take your daughter and build a new life elsewhere. The choice is entirely yours. The choice. Such a simple phrase for such a profound concept. How long had it been since Olivia had truly been able to choose her own path? Before Thomas, certainly. Perhaps even before her father died and she'd been left with limited options as a young woman alone. I need time, she said finally. To think. To understand what this means for Emma and me. Daniel nodded, rising to his feet. Take all the time you need. I should see to Rusty he had a long ride yesterday. As he walked toward the barn, Olivia remained on the porch steps, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her circumstances. She was free, truly free for the first time in years. The knowledge was dizzying, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. The days that followed brought a new rhythm to the ranch. Daniel maintained his respectful distance, never pressuring Olivia for a decision about her future. Emma told a simplified version of events that Papa had agreed to let them stay with Mr. Quinn if they wanted to seem unfazed by the development, continuing her exploration of ranch life with undiminished enthusiasm. Mrs. Fay, however, watched the careful dance between Daniel and Olivia with increasingly exasperated sighs. Nearly 2 weeks after Daniel's return from town, the housekeeper cornered Olivia in the pantry while they were taking inventory for the coming winter. You know that man is in love with you, Mrs. Fay stated without preamble, pointing her pencil at Olivia for emphasis. Olivia nearly dropped the jar of preserved peaches she was counting. Mrs. Fay, don't Mrs. Fay me in that scandalized tone. I'm too old for pretense. The older woman's expression softened. He's been half in love with you since he found you in those woods and fully in love since watching you rebuild yourself day by day. He hasn't said anything about love, Olivia protested weakly. Of course not. The man thinks you need time and space, not declarations. Mrs. Fay set down her inventory list with a sigh. Olivia, I've known Daniel Quinn for 8 years. He's a good man, the best I know. I've watched him build this ranch from nothing, treat his workers fairly, help neighbors without expectation of return. He deserves happiness. And you think I could make him happy? The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. I think you already do. The question is whether he makes you happy. The simple inquiry lingered in Olivia's mind throughout the day and into the evening. After Emma was tucked in bed, Olivia found herself wandering onto the porch where Daniel sat in his customary chair, whittling a small wooden figure by lamplight. "Is that a horse for Emma?" she asked, taking the chair beside his. Daniel nodded, holding up the half-finished carving, trying to capture Daisy's likeness, not sure I'm succeeding. "It's lovely." Olivia hesitated, then added, "You're very good with her, with Emma. She makes it easy." "Smart girl, observant." Daniel smiled, setting aside his work. Like her mother, Olivia felt a blush warm her cheeks, grateful for the dim light that concealed it. "Daniel, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. I'm all ears. That day in town when you confronted Thomas. What made you do it?" "Really?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "The truth." At Olivia's nod, he continued, "I couldn't stand the thought of you looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, waiting for him to find you. And I couldn't bear the idea of you and Emma leaving here to escape him." "You want us to stay," Olivia said softly, a statement rather than a question. "Yes." The word was simple but loaded with meaning. "I want you to stay, Olivia, not out of gratitude or obligation or lack of options, but because you want to." The honesty between them felt like a tangible thing, delicate yet strong. Olivia found herself speaking truths she'd barely acknowledged to herself. "When I first came here, all I wanted was safety, for Emma, for myself." She gazed out at the star-filled sky above the ranch. "But somewhere along the way, I started wanting more than just the absence of fear. I started wanting a real home again, happiness, maybe even love." Daniel remained perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. "And have you found those things here?" Olivia turned to face him fully. "I think I have, or at least the beginnings of them." The hope that dawned in Daniel's eyes gave her courage to continue. "I'd like to stay, Daniel, not as your housekeeper or a charity case, but as—" She faltered, unsure how to express what she wanted. "As my partner," Daniel suggested gently. "My equal, perhaps someday my wife." The word wife might have frightened her once, carrying as it did memories of submission and pain. But coming from Daniel, it held different promises of respect, of shared dreams, of love freely given and received. "Yes," Olivia whispered. "I think I'd like that, someday." Daniel reached across the space between their chairs, his hand extended palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Olivia placed her hand in his, marveling at how different this simple touch felt from any she'd known before. "I can wait for someday," Daniel said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her wrist. "We have time." Time. Another gift he'd given her, along with safety and freedom and hope. Time to heal, to grow stronger, to learn to trust again, not just others, but herself. As summer gave way to autumn, the ranch prepared for winter. Daniel and his hired hands mended fences and repaired the barn roof. Mrs. Fay directed the preservation of garden bounty, filling the root cellar with vegetables and the pantry with jams and pickles. Emma started lessons with books Daniel ordered from back east, showing a quick mind and eager curiosity about the world beyond the ranch. Olivia found herself flourishing in ways she'd never imagined possible. The constant vigilance that had been her companion for years gradually eased, allowing space for joy to take root. She learned to ride, to shoot a rifle for protection, to speak her mind without flinching in anticipation of anger. She discovered talents long suppressed for storytelling, for music, for creating beauty in small ways around the home she now considered hers. And slowly, cautiously, she allowed herself to explore the growing feelings between her and Daniel. Their courtship was unlike anything she'd experienced before, built on mutual respect and genuine friendship, progressing at her pace, each new intimacy a choice rather than a concession. Their first kiss came on a crisp October evening beside a bonfire Daniel had built to celebrate the end of the fall cattle drive. Mrs. Fay had taken an exhausted Emma inside to bed, leaving them alone beneath a canopy of stars, the fire's warmth keeping the autumn chill at bay. Happy. Daniel had asked simply, his arm resting lightly around her shoulders. Olivia had looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her, the strong jaw now relaxed in contentment, the storm-gray eyes reflecting firelight, the mouth that spoke only truth to her. Yes, she'd answered, meaning it completely. Then, gathering courage, she'd raised her hand to his cheek, turning his face toward hers. Very happy. The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, giving her every opportunity to withdraw. But Olivia found herself leaning closer, her hand sliding to the nape of his neck, answering his question with a certainty that surprised them both. When they finally parted, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you smile. Really smile without fear behind it. When was that? Olivia asked, curious. July. You were hanging laundry and Emma was trying to help but kept dropping the clothespins. Instead of getting frustrated, you laughed and made a game of it. His voice grew softer. I watched you from the corral and thought, there she is. The real Olivia, finally free. The memory of that simple moment, transformed through his perception into something profound, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. You saw me, the real me, even when I wasn't sure who that was anymore. I see you, Daniel confirmed, brushing away a tear with his thumb. And I love what I see, Olivia, all of it, your strength, your courage, your gentleness with Emma, your determination to rebuild your life. I love you. The words, spoken plainly without dramatic flourish, reached places in Olivia's heart she'd thought permanently scarred closed. I love you too, she whispered, the declaration both terrifying and liberating. I think I have for some time now. Their second kiss sealed these confessions, deeper and more certain than the first, a promise of the future they would build together. Winter arrived with a suddenness typical of the Arizona highlands, one day mild autumn sunshine, the next a biting wind carrying the first snowflakes. The ranch settled into its winter routine. Earlier evenings by the fire, longer mornings around the breakfast table, outdoor work limited to essentials. For Emma, the snow brought new wonders and delights. Daniel taught her to build snowmen and showed her how to identify animal tracks in the fresh powder. Mrs. Fay instructed her in making paper snowflakes to decorate the windows and baking special winter treats. For Olivia and Daniel, the season brought increased closeness, more time spent in conversation and quiet companionship. Their courtship progressed naturally, each day deepening their understanding of one another. By Christmas, it seemed to everyone at the ranch, including Emma, who had taken to calling Daniel Papa Dan when she thought her mother wasn't listening, that a more formal union was inevitable. The proposal came on New Year's Eve, as 1878 prepared to give way to 1879. Mrs. Fay had gone to bed early with a hint of matchmaking in her smile, and Emma had fallen asleep on the parlor sofa, worn out from excitement. Olivia and Daniel sat before the hearth, watching the flames dance as they sipped hot cider laced with cinnamon. I've been thinking, Daniel said, setting down his cup. A dangerous pastime, Olivia teased, comfortable enough now to joke with him. He smiled, reaching into his pocket. Maybe so. But I've been thinking that this past year brought me the greatest gifts of my life when you and Emma came into it, and I've been thinking that I'd like to start the new year by asking you a question. Olivia's heart quickened as she recognized the small wooden box in his hand. Daniel. Olivia Anderson, he said, sliding from his chair to kneel before her, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need a protector or provider, but because I believe we could build something beautiful together for the rest of our lives. Tears blurred Olivia's vision as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band inset with a small pearl. It's beautiful, she whispered. It was my grandmother's, Daniel explained, The only thing of value my father didn't drink away or sell." Olivia extended her hand, watching as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if meant for her all along. "Yes," she said, voice steady and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you, Daniel Quinn." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough to any lingering doubts she might have harbored. This was right, this was where she belonged. "When?" Daniel asked, still holding her hand. "Spring," Olivia decided. "When the wildflowers bloom in the meadow." "Perfect," he agreed, rising to draw her into his arms. "Just enough time for Mrs. Fay to plan a celebration that will have the whole county talking." Their laughter woke Emma, who blinked sleepily at them from the sofa. "Why are you laughing? Is it midnight yet?" Daniel crossed to lift her into his arms. "Not quite, little one, but your mother has just agreed to marry me." "How would you feel about that?" Emma's eyes widened, suddenly fully awake. "Really, you'll be my papa for real, if you'll have me," Daniel replied seriously. "Yes." Emma threw her arms around his neck in unrestrained joy. "Yes, yes, yes." Over Emma's shoulder, Daniel's eyes met Olivia's, sharing a look of pure happiness that needed no words. In that moment, as the old year waned and a new one prepared to dawn, Olivia felt the final piece of her heart heal, not erasing the scars of her past, but transforming them into stepping stones that had led her here. To this family she and Emma had found in the most unexpected of places. Their wedding took place in April of 1879, just as Olivia had wished, with wildflowers carpeting the meadow beside the ranch house. The ceremony was small but joyful. Daniel's ranch hands and their families, a few neighbors, the minister from Sierra Vista, and Mrs. Fay glowing with pride as she stood witness. Emma served as flower girl, solemn with the responsibility until the moment came to throw her petals, when excitement overtook her, and she flung them all at once in a shower of color that made everyone laugh. She stood beside her mother throughout the ceremony, holding a special candle that Daniel had suggested they include, a symbol that he was committing himself not just to Olivia, but to Emma as well. The vows they exchanged were simple but profound, promises of respect and honesty alongside the traditional pledges of love and fidelity. When Daniel placed a second ring on Olivia's finger, this one a gold band he'd saved for months to purchase, the minister pronounced them husband and wife with evident pleasure. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Quinn," the minister announced. Daniel's kiss was gentle but certain, a promise of the life they would build together, equal partners in all things. When they turned to face their gathered friends, Olivia felt a sense of rightness so complete it nearly overwhelmed her. The celebration continued into evening, with music from a fiddler Daniel had hired from town, dancing in the yard, and a feast Mrs. Fay had been preparing for days. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Emma fell asleep early, worn out from excitement and too many sweets, carried to bed by Mrs. Fay, who promised to stay with her so the newlyweds could enjoy their evening. The last guests departed as the moon rose, leaving Olivia and Daniel alone beneath the star-filled sky. "Happy, Mrs. Quinn?" Daniel asked, echoing the question that had become something of a ritual between them. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Olivia answered truthfully, leaning into his embrace as they gazed out over the land that was now truly their home. The years that followed brought challenges, as all lives do, but also joys that far outweighed the difficulties. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Daniel's practical knowledge of cattle and land, complemented by Olivia's careful financial management, and innovative ideas for diversification. Emma grew from a cautious child into a confident young woman with her mother's determination and her adoptive father's quiet strength. She excelled in her studies with the tutor they hired, showing particular aptitude for mathematics and literature. By 16, she was helping Daniel keep the ranch books and writing stories that the local newspaper occasionally published. 2 years after their wedding, Olivia gave birth to a son they named James, after Daniel's grandfather. A daughter, Sarah, followed 3 years later, completing their family. The house expanded along with their numbers, Daniel adding rooms and a larger kitchen, Olivia creating gardens that bloomed from spring through fall. Mrs. Faye remained with them, becoming grandmother to all 3 children, though she gradually relinquished household management to Olivia, content to spoil the little ones and offer wisdom when asked. Her health began to fail in the winter of 1890, and she passed peacefully in her sleep that February, mourned deeply by the family she had helped create. Thomas Anderson never returned to Sierra Vista or attempted to contact Olivia. Years later, they heard through traveling merchants that he had died in a saloon fight in Tucson. In 1882, news that Olivia received with complicated emotions, but no regret for the path her life had taken. As the century drew toward its close, Olivia sometimes marveled at the journey that had brought her from terrified flight through darkened woods to the rich, full life she now led. On quiet evenings, watching Daniel teach young James to whittle or listening to Sarah read aloud while Emma sketched their portraits, she would remember the desperate woman she had been and feel profound gratitude for the courage that had driven her into the forest that night. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" Daniel asked on one such evening in the autumn of 1895, finding her alone on the porch while the children helped with after-dinner chores inside. "The past," Olivia admitted. "How differently everything might have turned out if you hadn't found our trail that day." Daniel settled beside her, taking her hand in a gesture that, even after 16 years of marriage, still brought comfort and connection. "I've always believed it was more than chance that led me to you and Emma." "What then? Fate? Divine intervention?" "Perhaps." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening evidence of years spent squinting in sunshine, laughing with their children, building a life rich with purpose. "Or perhaps I simply followed my heart." Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as the setting sun painted the Sierra Vista mountains in shades of gold and purple. "I'm glad you did." "So am I, my love," Daniel murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So am I." In the distance, cattle lowed softly as they settled for the night. Inside the house, their children's laughter mingled with the familiar sounds of home. And here on the porch, in the gentle quiet of approaching evening, Olivia and Daniel Quinn sat together. 2 people who had found in each other not just love but the courage to believe in second chances and the wisdom to recognize that, sometimes, the most important journeys begin with the simple act of following one's heart.